Hi everybody, welcome to Law News Network. I'm Heather Hansen and I am here with Tamara Holder. She is a former Fox contributor and a current civil rights attorney. She is also the woman who had Fox publicly admit to some abuse that took place at Fox News. She entered into a settlement with Fox News parent company for over $2.5 million. She's here today to talk a little bit about her experience and also about sexual harassment in the workplace in general. Welcome, Tamara.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. Now tell us a little bit about what led to the settlement in general. You had an experience while you were working at Fox News. How long had you been there?
Almost 7 years at the time.
And you were working as a contributor, so
Yes.
you were there sort of part-time, not a full-time host. Is that right?
Right. A contributor basically just means an exclusive person on the network, so I couldn't go on to CNN or other networks and you receive compensation in exchange for exclusivity.
And after those years, you were actually assaulted. More than harassment, this was a sexual assault allegation that you brought, isn't that right?
I can't talk about anything other than what was in the New York Times. I can't go into it. But I'm not trying to be vague about that. I just want to make sure that I talk about moving forward the things that we can do to change this environment, not just at Fox, but around the country.
Okay. The settlement was for a claim that you brought against Francisco Cortez, who Fox immediately fired. So you brought the case, and isn't it the case that it was about 2 years after the alleged incident that you actually had the wherewithal to bring it and to make it public and to report it to Fox?
It was actually a year and a half after the incident.
And what happened in that year and a half that gave you the ability to do that? Because I think that this is the bottom line of these sexual harassment cases, Tamara, is that only a quarter to a third of women actually bring up complaint to their supervisors,
Right.
and less than 10% actually file a complaint. So we've got to take, this is happening, we're hearing so much about what's going on at Fox, but I think more importantly, it's happening everywhere. Fox is not alone. People
Right.
would like to think that Fox is alone. I myself have been on Fox, never ever had a single experience like this. But it does happen in other parts of my life, and I have had that experience in other parts of my life. What gave you the courage to come forward when you did? Was it Gretchen Carlson?
Yeah, a lot of it was Gretchen Carlson. It was a lot of things. At the time of the incident, my mother was dying of cancer. I, just like every other woman in America, wanted to work. And my background, I'm a criminal defense attorney. You would think that a criminal defense attorney of all things would easily be able to go to the police and report it. And I was overcome with fear. So it's until something like this happens to you, it's hard to say, well, why didn't you just do it at the time?
I actually have to say, I saw an interview with you from 2011 where you said that about women who had been in this experience. They had accused Brett Favre, they were massage therapists, of sexual harassment, and you said just that. You said, who waits 2 years? But now, and I know from my own experience, when you go through something like this, you see it in a totally different light. And
Yes.
then you can understand, and when we know better, we can actually do better and support each other better.
Yes, and so much of it is fear. If you look at a few years ago, the Rolling Stone article that came out, the woman was lying about being raped on a college campus. But to your point about the statistics, there are so many young women who were raped on college campuses, and it's just unfortunate that this one woman had to lie and ruin the conversation and how we move it forward, how we actually protect women in the workplace, or at school or on college campuses, because it is happening. And if we take away the fear and we take away certain, aspects.
Well, the idea, I think that the idea that you felt, it says in the New York Times article that you were told by some of the people that you reported this to when you did. So now you've waited a year and a half out of fear, your personal experiences, the fact that you did not want to lose your job, you didn't want to lose the opportunity to be on Fox, of course. And so you wait that long, and then when you start to approach it, people tell you that you're going to be considered toxic. That makes it hard.
Yes, and there's a story coming out this week, hopefully today, fingers crossed, about my agents, specifically who they are and what they said to me in email, in writing, about not reporting this. So this isn't just something that women make up. We try to speak out to people. I also had experiences with people who said, well, you know, your story and it's this memory, it doesn't make sense or whatever. And so women start to doubt themselves.
Well, and the thing is, you know, sunshine is always the best disinfectant. So we need to shed the light on all of it and be willing to have these conversations that are sometimes difficult, and to say to one another, well, why did you say that then and you say this now? You know, it is hard. I think it's hard for men. I think it's hard for the public because we send confusing signals sometimes. I saw Kristen Powers, who used to be on Fox, said on CNN last week that Bill O'Reilly is a sexist. And yet, in 2014, she wrote an op-ed saying Bill O'Reilly is not a sexist. And so we've got to be able to have conversations about what has changed. What are you doing now? Why are you willing to say this now than you weren't willing to say it before? And I think that, and it can't be, we have to be vulnerable about it.
Right. Well, another thing is that you left out about people speaking out. Women need to protect each other as well.
Absolutely.
And I found it very saddening that I didn't get any support from any women currently at Fox or formerly at Fox, other than Gretchen Carlson. And it's unfortunate that women still are not supporting each other. I understand if you're afraid for yourself, but if we want equal pay, if we want equal rights, then we need to equally protect each other and just say, look, I'm here for you. Because guess what? There were men there that reached out and supported me.
I couldn't agree with you more, except that just like you in 2011 didn't believe those women, it's hard unless you've been through something similar. I think that once you've been through something similar or know someone who has, and that's why we need to talk about it.
Right.
Because then we know someone who has been through this.
Well, that's why getting an admission, or lack of a better word, from Fox was so important to me, because it wasn't an allegation, it was something that was investigated and something that we jointly put out together.
And they acted on, and listen, Fox acted on your situation, put everything else aside, appropriately.
Yes.
The minute that you told them about it, they investigated it, the perpetrator was immediately fired.
Yes.
You know, it sounds like they did everything well.
They did the right thing.
In researching for this piece, I was reading a lot about sexual harassment and what it means and what it is legally, but also what companies should be doing to prevent it. And the EEOC comes out with some recommendations. And one of the things they say is when you start getting more complaints, it means that you're doing your job well, because people aren't afraid anymore. So the fact that Fox is now getting more and more complaints, do you think that they are doing their job well, that more and more people feel comfortable coming forward? It seems to me that there's an argument to be made that that is the case.
No, I think that the complaints are from incidents that happened before, and the fear has been removed from these women, and they now feel they can go and report. I don't think that these are new incidents of sexual harassment, although I don't know, I'm not privy to what those complaints are. But remember, it was very hard to, and this is nothing out of new, all of the reports show that it was very hard to report an incident at Fox News.
For sure. I think that the culture before, under Roger Ailes, and now that Bill O'Reilly has left as well, it seems, you know, Alison Camerata was on CNN this weekend, and she used to be at Fox, and she gave an interview to Brian Stelter, and she said, it seems as though the culture is changing with the Murdochs in charge, and they're really looking into these issues. You know, it seems as though, especially with all the reporting, they now have a hotline. Many of the things that are noted for the EEOC, ways to prevent sexual harassment, are actually going on. I do want to ask you about Sean Hannity, because that is a big thing in the news this weekend. A woman named Debbie Schlussel, who used to be on Fox and was often on Sean Hannity's show, gave her an interview on Friday where she said that Sean had done some things that made her uncomfortable. And when that interview became public, Sean punched back very hard and said that he is going to look into legal repercussions against her, that this is absolutely untrue. Now, this morning in an exclusive interview with Rachel Stockman here at Law News, she stepped back on those allegations and says, oh, I never would say that he sexually harassed me. Something like this push-pull, doesn't it only make it more difficult for women to come forward in the future? Because now it's, did he or didn't he? She said maybe he did. Now she's saying that he didn't. Doesn't this actually hurt women in their cases?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that you really have to understand the background of a person. Sean Hannity to my knowledge, doesn't have any background of settlements, multi-million-dollar settlements at Fox News. I personally know Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity is a really, really good man. He's probably one of the best men that I know in my life. He's been a mentor to me. I have exchanged thousands of text messages and emails with him over the course of 8 years. Not at any point has he ever even suggested anything inappropriate. And yes, to your point, just because Sean, by the way, let me just give an understanding of Sean Hannity. Sean Hannity, and I would say this to his face, there's a little bit of an insecurity to him. He likes people around him. He's like he needs the hype men around him.
Pretty much anybody on television.
Right, and so when he says, come to the hotel with me, that is not come to my hotel room with me and get naked and let's do something inappropriate. That is, come to the hotel with me, get in the car with me and 15 other people, because from the hotel we're going to the book signing. From the hotel we're going to dinner.
Right.
There is nothing about Sean Hannity that, in my opinion, and 8 years of working very closely with him, is inappropriate or proves that he is any kind of sexual harasser. And I think that what she says minimizes, like to your point, all of the women who really do have claims against.
And she certainly seems to have stepped back. I mean, she had some other things with Hannity. She has in the past accused him of his charity not being appropriate, and that has been struck back upon. She in the past has said that he, different things that she said in her blog, and he has consistently been saying that she is lying and that this is inappropriate. And with this, she does seem to have stepped back. But to the bigger picture, as we said, it hurts the ability for women to come forward in the future, because you do start to wonder about each accuser. Is this true, or is it a way to get more experience, more eyes, more Twitter followers, more of all of that? And so women like Debbie Schlessel coming forward and making these types of allegations can actually be the biggest enemy towards trying to resolve this problem.
Yes and no, because what happens is the more we speak out, the more workplace HR and lawyers will start to investigate immediately. If you are not afraid, and then you go and you speak out, you get an investigation, and we remove the fear, the Band-Aid of fear. And then suddenly there is no he said, she said. There is evidence. There's a question. It's not 10 years later that we're now looking into something.
Yep.
And really all of this is fear-based. If women were not afraid and came forward at the time of the incident, we would not have these he said, she said questions.
Well, that's right. And to your point about people like Debbie Schlessel, we have to be willing to take some of the people who are not going to be completely honest about their experience in order to hear all of the people who are going to be completely honest about their experiences.
And they're be copycats.
Right.
They're going to be copycat
Right.
terrorists and serial killers, and they're going to be copycat wannabe victims of sexual abuse, which is really, really twisted. To think that somebody psychologically can go so far as to go on a show and say something without any factual basis whatsoever, or it's questionable, or not make it clear, where you have to step back. You have to look at the person and say, what is wrong with this person?
Now, one of the things that I read about ways to improve the culture in general, and not just at Fox News, but across the board, in any business where men are in power and women feel that they don't have the power, one of the things, as I said, is when you get more and more complaints, it's actually a sign that you're doing something right. And it seems as though in some ways that's happening at Fox, which is a wonderful thing. The other thing that they mentioned, and it occurred to me that it happened with you, is to have women in positions of power. Because if you have women in positions of power, it may be easier to approach them. And I saw in the New York Times article, you actually approached a woman about it first. Did you feel more comfortable because she was a woman?
I don't know which woman you're talking about, but the first person that I told of the incident was a former federal prosecutor, and this was right after it happened. So, but she was a friend.
Okay, but what about within the Fox community?
Right.
Were there females that you felt more comfortable approaching? No.
No, it wasn't about that. It was that this was the person that I knew I had to go to, because I didn't know of this hotline. I didn't know of anybody. I'd never had contact with HR ever. So the one person that I went to is the one person I knew to go to, and that was it. I had no other options.
During that year and a half, when you weren't reporting it out of fear, did you ever think about discussing it with other contributors to see if maybe they had a similar experience? Or you make this face like, oh my gosh, you just felt as though that was something that wouldn't be well received? Why the fear of not approaching another woman?
because I think TV is it's a very competitive place. And there's also a culture, there was a culture at Fox where women, there are 24 hours in the day. And if I'm on TV, that means you're not. And women just didn't, at least in my experience, I'm not necessarily for everybody to like, but I didn't have friends there, to be honest. Right. I don't know if it's because of my progressive liberal leanings, but I'm not just going to go up to somebody and say, hey, by the way, guess what happened to me? Can you help me?
Well, and that's the thing. That's another point that the EEOC recommendations make, is to have as many people as possible authorized to receive these complaints. Because if you had friends, and I do think when you were on Fox, you definitely were the liberal person most often. And so maybe that sort of feeds into an inability to connect when you're outside of work. But if you do have friends and people that you trust, or at least people in positions of power across the board, it does give you a little bit more of comfort to come forward, I would think.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that it's just talking about it and believing women. And again, once you remove the fear.
That's right.
Once you remove the fear, we don't need to necessarily have to go to this friend or that friend and speak to another woman. We know this happened, I can report it immediately. And the other thing is, the more we talk about it, the more men know that their behavior is wrong, and the more men will stop doing these kinds of things.
Well, and that's an important point as well, because sexual harassment is confusing. I mean, what happened to you, according to the New York Times article, is not confusing. What happened to you, according to that article, is pretty black and white. However, there are some things, and again, this is not just me saying it. I did a lot of research over the weekend about how to deal with these types of things, and there are things like flirting, teasing. If it is unwelcome, that is the first step towards it being sexual harassment. But what is unwelcome to me may not be unwelcome to the woman who works next to me. So it becomes difficult, and we have to be able to talk to each other and men about it so that they understand, because otherwise it's just not fair to them.
Well, also, we're just changing culture, right?
That's right.
I was doing research on feminism, and back in the day, as in the 70s, there were conversations about how flirting equaled the unchastity of a woman, and how women who flirted were sluts. And it's just shocking, because now we have online dating, and flirting is okay on both sides. So it's really changing the culture and drawing lines and drawing boundaries. What is okay and what is not okay.
And it's different for each person. And I do think, to your point of changing the culture, it takes time. So, there seems to be this big pile on Fox now. I have to imagine that this happens, because I know it happens in every aspect of life, whether it's law or business or medicine or Silicon Valley. I mean, we've seen it there.
Right.
I'm sure it's not just happening at Fox. I'm sure there's other media outlets where this is happening. But because Fox, it's such a public thing right now between Roger Ailes and now Bill O'Reilly, it gives them the opportunity to do things right and slowly change the culture. Us talking about it will slowly change the culture.
Right.
Because otherwise, it is, and especially given, President Trump has stood behind Bill O'Reilly, and the allegations against him. It is definitely something that we need to feel comfortable to continue to speak out against, even in times where it may be uncomfortable and we may feel a little bit weird at the very least.
Right. Yeah. And the cost of doing business is sometimes making settlements when people shouldn't, when companies shouldn't be settling. Right. Somebody claims that they slipped and fell in the workplace, and really they just didn't want to work, and they write them a check for $50,000. So companies definitely have to deal with that on the sexual harassment side of it as well. That there are claims that women may make, and the cost of doing business is writing a check to make them go away. Not every woman, as we've seen with the Sean Hannity accuser, is telling the truth. But that being said, you do not write a check for $85 million, or checks. That's what the total has come to as reported, and I'm sure it's more. $85 million for women. And keep in mind,
the $85 million, you're talking about what has been paid out at Fox.
Fox has paid over $85 million, as reported in this weekend. And that is not the cost of doing business. That is making women shut up and then their careers are over. And meanwhile, Roger Ailes goes on, Bill O'Reilly goes on, they continue their work. And that's what's disgusting, is that women are not only shut up, but they're paid to shut up, and then they're ruined forever.
Well, and I think that's, there's only so much that Fox can do now. The Murdoch brothers and the Rupert, it seems like they're trying to make this shift, and the cultural shift where we can have these conversations. In general, though, Tamara, if we just take a step back and you're talking to young girls who are just starting their careers in any sort of business, how do you counsel them to A, stay out of a position where this can even happen, if at all possible, and B, how to report it if it does happen, how to deal with it if it does happen?
I don't think you can stay out of a position that that isn't your fault. I think that any girl that's drunk at a frat party is not asking to be raped. I think that any young woman or older woman goes into an office and the door closes, she's not necessarily asking to be sexually assaulted. That being said, I think that women just need to be very transparent in how they behave and how they act and how they feel, and say this behavior, and again, removing the fear, saying, I don't like what you're saying to me, this is inappropriate.
Well, and I think that's what I mean by staying out of the position. Immediately being willing to say, that's not something that I'm enjoying. I'm not, I'm not comfortable with that.
This behavior is wrong.
That's right. It makes me uncomfortable.
Right.
And then once it's happened, when you're hearing things about being toxic, once that's happened, how would you counsel girls who have been through a situation similar to yours to handle it?
To keep going. Keep working. You may be out of a job, but you can still survive. And speaking up is more important for your mental health and for helping other women than it is for staying silent. The amount of psychological trauma that I still am going through just because I chose to stay silent is just, it's something I'll never get back.
And that's an interesting point, that you attribute the trauma to staying silent.
Oh,
not
yes.
And so that's important for people to realize, that by not speaking, you're actually hurting yourself as well. And so you're better off to speak and deal with the repercussions, and hopefully get the support of your support network, so that you can then go forward. Because, in the words of Maya Angelou, when we know better, we do better. And I think that is the attempt that is being made at Fox right now. I think that is something that we can all work on together,
right,
so that we can make this something that we won't have to talk about anymore.
Right. I agree.
Tamara, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for so much for telling your story. Women need to hear it, men need to hear it, and we appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll be back with more trials.